In a world that seems to be getting smaller and smaller because communication seems to be getting more and more accessible, it seems as if relationships can have intimacy through conversation without an in-person connection. We seem to be growing closer, more in-depth relationships with many individuals all around the world simply at the push of a button. The idea that we're able to communicate with individuals who live on the other side of the world in the span of seconds is mind-boggling. To think back to even 100 years ago, this feat of worldwide interpersonal communication would be impossible to understand. I love the way Mark Cuban puts it. 12 years ago, there was no iPhone. 25 years ago, the internet and Google, it also wasn't a thing. 30 years ago, PCs were very, very rare, and we've come so far from just that. From the 1830s to 40s, there was the invention of the telegraph, which was pretty big considering that communication without face-to-face encounters, aside from letters, was scarce until now. According to Statista Research Department, in 2016, an estimated 62.9% of the population worldwide has already owned a mobile phone and are able to have instant connection globally. That's incredible, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's for the better. So what is interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication is all means of communication between two or more individuals. It is a skill you develop when you are young and carry through your entire life, growing it and nurturing it. When I look at my friend's baby, Bo, it's really interesting because he cries when he's hungry, tired, or simply in need of something. He has an understanding that outwardly expressing in this manner means that he will be taken care of, and that is his way of interpersonal communication, even at that age. In the same way, Paul calls us to grow in our faith, going from infants in knowledge to growing more mature, especially in communication, because the Bible calls us to do things with excellence, go and make disciples, and love your neighbor, and we can't do that unless we know how to communicate well. So, what is social media? Well, social media is an accumulation of online websites intended for connecting people. The mission statements of the leading industry's mega companies summarize what social media was actually intended to look like. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter all have an underlying principle that community-based communication worldwide is what they are looking to achieve. Because they know that each one of us long to be part of something greater than ourselves. If we try and find the intended audience of social media, by looking at the United States, we can see that 72% of all United States adults use at least one form of social media. That's roughly 7 out of 10 people. That shows that whatever age range, demographic, gender, social media will tailor to each specific individual and personalize everything in order to maintain satisfaction for all users. It can seem, however, that social media has no positives at all, where that is completely incorrect. Social media has many positive impacts on today's world. From talking to and seeing the lives of friends who are not geographically close to me, supporting them through hundreds of miles of separation, to easily scheduling and corresponding in order to have connectivity as easily as possible with one another. These are all good things. Although there are positives, there are also negatives that associate with social media. Social media can consume, create pride, depress, cause anxiety, and even utterly distract people. Social media has a tendency to create a false sense of identity in things like followers or likes. Or it creates an atmosphere of inadequacy in comparison where you think what you have isn't good enough anymore. It causes people to be closed off and to guard their hearts because vulnerability is scary and social media is making everything look very polished. Also, social media has a major influence on all generations. From celebrities to advertisements, we as the consumers are highly susceptible to marketer, celebrity, and peer influence. We usually follow the things that will cause us to stay relatively unchallenged and biased in our own beliefs. That being said, when used correctly, it can help people stay connected, positively influence, and make known the gospel in places where we couldn't otherwise go. So now that we know social media influences, let's take a look to see how it influences and impacts different generations. For children, adolescents, and infants, it greatly impacts their developing brain and can hinder them, causing depression, anxiety, and other things similar to that. There's limited research when looking at the developmental stages of adults with social media, but it also causes great impact with them as well, causing distraction, depression, anxiety, and more. But the research is more scarce, leaving adults to wonder where they fit in. Let's go back to teenagers for a moment. During the summer, I got to lead a camp, and with me I brought along adult volunteers and one 16-year-old girl. Now, during a group discussion, the girl pulled out her phone, took a picture of her forehead, and sent it out to her friends. Now, this was confusing to me, but to her, this was one way that she could experience worth. Some people, especially teenagers, only hear positivity online. That's why it's so crucial for us as Christians to practice our interpersonal communication skills to tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ. All that being said, social media is all about balance. It has the potential to harm, but it can also benefit in many ways. Being mindful of our social media usage can ensure that we are not slaves to social media, but slaves to Christ. Because we don't need social media, but we do need Jesus. God has given us tools and capabilities to go all over the world and make disciples of Him. Social media is one of those tools, but we have to treat it as such and use it for the kingdom of God. In a world that is growing and expanding with technology, we cannot avoid technology, but we can incorporate it into making disciples and making Jesus known to all nations of every tribe and every tongue. We are called to share the good news of Jesus. So let's take back technology and use it for the kingdom of God.